and I was 13. I just remember that in sprinting, you can alter your lines. And actually, I remember putting the kid into the barriers, and he was a lot bigger than me. And it was probably the best hook I ever threw in my whole career. Was the very first race when I was 13. So I won that race. Actually, probably was the dirtiest sprint I ever did.
Was the other racer okay?
Yeah, he didn't crash or anything, but I sealed him up pretty good among the barrier.
Welcome to the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast. I'm Matthew Pioro. I'm joined by Matt Hansen. Welcome, Matt.
Aloha.
And connecting with us from Oudenaarde in Belgium, our man on his own classics campaign is James Bunga. Welcome, James.
Hey guys, good to be back. Thanks for having me, as always.
Are you eating Fritz as we speak?
I wish. I did have some, though, at Ghent Wevelgem. They were quite good.
No ketchup, right? Mayonnaise?
No, the curry ketchup and mayonnaise. That's the combo. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
In this episode, we have a feature interview with Gord Fraser. I don't like to use the word legend. Over the years, I've cut that word out of many a writer's copy, but I think you can call Gord Fraser a legend. He's in the Canadian Cycling Hall of Fame. The Redlands Bicycle Classic has given him its Legends Award. So there you go. The first question, though, I posed to Gord in our interview was, did he really win more than 200 races during his career? But before the interview with Gord, let's look at the racing in Northern Europe and preview the second monument of the season, the Tour of Flanders, or the Ronde van Vlaanderen. James, you are in road cycling's Holy Land right now. Tell us what races you've been to.
So last week, I was at E3 Saxo Classic, and then the following weekend, I was in Wevelgem, or Ghent Wevelgem now, in Flanders Field from Middelkerk to Wevelgem.
Just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. I think it's about 50-50 as to what people are calling it on the ground, but it's certainly a bit confusing.
What is it like moving around these races?
I mean, like anything, it's super, super chaotic when the World Tour is involved. There are tons and tons and tons of team cars, team buses, a ludicrous amount of motorcycles, 2 helicopters. It really is just like a rolling circus. I actually caught E3 earlier in the day by accident when I was just out on my ride in the morning. I saw a helicopter flying low, and I was like, I wonder why it's flying so low. And then I started to see all the motors go, the team cars, and then the group roll ahead. And it's just, it's crazy. It's really, really crazy to see.
How would you compare it to the Montreal Grand Prix, which you've covered in the past?
Honestly, Montreal is great. It's a fantastic race, but these races out here make Montreal look like an office park crit on a Tuesday night. It's just the sheer scale of everything is so much bigger out here. And the amount of fans, the amount of all the extra merch and swag that's being thrown at you from every single angle in the Finnish towns is crazy. Yeah, Montreal is great. Montreal Worlds is going to be great. But so far, my experience here is that the racing is just a totally different level out here.
Did you get to ride any cobbles yet when you were out tootling around?
I did. On my first day here, when the airline was a day late getting me my bike. So I finally got my bike from the airline. I put it together, went out for a ride. I was like, okay, I just want to do an easy hour, spin out the legs. Everything is sore from, standing and running around the terminals and dealing with all my bags. I just want something nice, easy, get the legs working again. And I accidentally ended up on some cobble sectors. When first I saw them, I was pretty excited. I was like, hey, cobbles, this is, Belgium, this is what it's all about. And I quickly changed my mind the second I got onto them. It was insanely hard to ride, very bumpy. I was worried about my headset. My bottles almost came loose. It's insane how bumpy it is. And keep in mind, I'm on 32C tires on 25 mil rims. So super wide, comfy setup. It's crazy to me that people were, riding these back in the day on old skinny steel tube bikes with 23C tires.
I think in the early 60s, they might have been using 21. Like they moved up to 23 around the time of Merckx, right? And that was big and fat. But also, James, when you're just training, I think a lot of pros wouldn't necessarily train on the cobbles. They just do recons. And when you're going 50 versus like 30, they always say, it's easier when you go faster because you float across them. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Are you planning to do any Roubaix cobbles?
We'll see. The Roubaix Velodrome's not far from where I am. It's about like a 50K ride, so it's within reach for sure.
Because I swear the Roubaix ones are worse than the Belgian ones. But anyway, we'll let you decide if you're able to sample the Carrefour de Labre, which I highly recommend. All right, let us look ahead, but also look back a little bit. Actually, I want to play a game with you, James, called What Did You See and What Didn't You See? Because when you're on the ground, you get this incredible roadside view, but that's at the expense of what people get to see on TV with helicopters and motos and a whole production team putting things together for us getting the stream at home. Let's start with, did you see Nick Zukowski in the break? And I should say that's at E3 Sexist Classic. Oh, I'm sorry, E3 Saxo Classic. What did you see of the break?
Despite, the hit or miss organizers of the race, the riders really made it fun to watch, especially our good friend, Nick Zukowski. I was eagerly watching, hoping he was still going to be in the break, and the break was still going to be away when he passed me on the Ekenberg. And I think one of the best parts about watching bike racing in person is the sort of huddle of everyone around one phone and just kind of hoping and looking at everyone kind of squeeze in to see what's happening. And then the riders finally get there. And I was so stoked to see Zukowski on the front, pain face in full effect, just totally leading it up the Ekenberg, desperately trying to stay away from Van der Poel chasing behind.
And of course, Van der Poel did get out in front. He had quite the breakaway and there were 4 riders chasing him. Those included Per Strand Hagenens, Florian Vermeersch, Stan de Wolf, and Jonas Abrahamsen. And my favorite move of that race was the fake sit-up by Van der Poel in the final 2 clicks. And then the 4 chasers just seemed to get confused and give up. They seemed kind of chumpy in the end of it.
I think he was toast, though. I mean, what a jit, right? I mean, almost got caught. They're saying it was tactics, but I think also he might have just been toast because he looked terrible when he crossed the line. I mean, he really hung on. I've never seen him suffer so much.
It's true, eh?
But it worked. It worked. When he sat up, they're like, oh, okay, we got him. Let's mess around now. And then he's like, maybe not.
Yeah, that was a good move. Whether it was fully intentional or not, like whether it was a great poker move or he really was thinking of giving up, who cares? The effect was pretty killer. James, you did see Mathieu van der Poel away, but you weren't able to make it to the finish. Is that correct?
No, I was not able to make it to the finish. Like I said, it's quite chaotic getting around here with road closures and having the right stickers to get through, having the right passes to get through. I've been doing my best to get as many stops as possible, but I'm quickly learning it is quite the feat. But I've got some now connections with some Belgian photographers who've been helping me out. So hopefully in the races to come, I will have a bit more stops and it'll be a little bit less chaotic.
And you were treated, I believe, to a spectacular, what do you call it? I guess one rider was just dropped so badly. How badly was this rider dropped?
Yes. So one of the Bahrain victorious riders was dropped so far out the back that he seemed to be in an entirely different kind of cycling group. It was a group of various tourists on Trek FX2 hybrid bikes, riding the course behind the broom wagon, behind the sea of cars. And it was quite the sight to see one of the World Tour pros hanging out and chatting with a bunch of people on sit-up hybrids.
This episode of the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast is supported by MS Bike. MS Bike is running 10 great rides this season in 6 provinces. The first events are near the end of June, and the final ones are in September. Here's what I recommend. Head to msbike.ca, click on the ride nearest you, and browse the photos from previous rides. At the 2025 Windsor event, there was a rider in a tutu and helmet with a big silver bow. In Chilliwack, a bike was outfitted with a dinosaur tail, and that rider's helmet had quote-unquote bony plates to match. But costumes or no costumes, what you'll definitely see is riders like you having fun and making a difference. Each MS bike ride is fully supported with fuel, roadside assistance, and first aid. These events are very welcoming. You only really need a bike, a helmet, and the desire to keep pedaling. Costumes are optional. Of course, this is all for an important cause, that is raising money to help those with MS. Did you know that on average, 12 Canadians are diagnosed with MS each day? You can help. Register now and start your fundraising journey at msbike.ca. All right, I want to leave E3 there and just briefly touch on Ronde van Brugge, the women's race that was held just before E3. I think the takeaway, I'll just quickly mention that Lorena Wiebes is not invincible. The chaotic sprint did not help her. She wasn't able to pull it off there. There was kind of surprise winner. I was surprised, let's say. Karis Lloyd of Movistar, the 19-year-old, took the win, which was so cool to see. And Alex Volstad was 10th, the Canadian rider. I think what that says about Flanders coming up is, although Lorena Wiebes is definitely one of the favorites, she, is not invincible. All right. Flanders Fields, Ghent-Wevelgem in Flanders Fields, the race formerly known as... Anyway... James, what did you see there on the ground?
So for that race, I was at the finish line for the finish of the race. And of course, the big thing of that day was, would Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel make it to the finish? Of course, they ended up not making it, but it was quite a tense moment at the line. Again, everyone either huddled around phones or squinting, trying to make out what's happening on the big screen in the distance. But yeah, there was a lot of cheering for Wout, obviously, in Belgium. And yeah, it was very tense as to whether or not they were going to make it. But eventually they got swallowed up by the group. And we saw the peloton come in super fast for the finishing straight where Jasper eventually took it. But I will say, when you're actually standing in the finish line, all that separates you between, 150 riders is a white piece of tape telling you not where to stand over. So we saw the whole group shoot right by us and just turn out of the way right in the last second. And that was something pretty crazy to experience in person.
So that's in the photographer's huddle there, just after the finish line?
Yeah, they put some tape down on the road and they say, do not cross this line and stay still when the riders go by you.
You're protected by a little piece of tape. I like that.
Much like many bike lanes in Canada.
Right. A little bit of paint, a little bit of tape. Amazing power there. Amazing power. I was impressed to see Alex Segart, Mr. Late Breakaway guy, join with the dynamic duo there of Mathieu van der Poel and Wout van Aert. Alex Segart has definitely lit up a few races this year with his late breakaways. We have Norca Corsa and as well as Grand Prix de Nantes, where his late move actually paid off.
Can you imagine the one time you get in the break with these two guys? The one time you're like, I'm made in the shade, man. I got at least third, and he gets caught. I got it, man. I can just sit on here. I'll get third. Nope.
Well, on that point, I'm wondering, a few years ago, we would have seen this pair and thought, yeah, it's done. It's done. The race is done. These two are going to the line. And maybe, is this a sign of a switch? The absolute dominance of these guys is not what it once was?
I think Van der Poel was still cooked from the other day. And, it's only 2 days earlier. And Wout is still kind of getting his legs back. I think it was just, I think at Flanders, you'll see Van der Poel being Van der Poel. And
possibly Van der Poel made the calculation, this is not my race anymore. It's Jasper Philipsen's. For the women's Ghent-Wevelgem, there was the move by Lorena Wiebes on the final climb of the Kemmelberg. Only 4 riders were able to stay with her. 2 from UAE, that's Eleonora Gasparini, and there was Carlin Swinkles, Fleur Moores, and Elise Shabby. That group stayed away. In the final kilometers, it was Gasparini who tried a few attacks. Wiebes closed the second one. Wiebes led out her own sprint, and she nearly sellied too early. You think she would have learned after the 2024 Amstel Gold kerfuffle, where Marianne Vos took the win, as Wiebes thought she had it. Wiebes later said, "I shouldn't give my sport director a heart attack." Let's look ahead to Ron van Vlaanderen, Tour of Flanders. On the women's side, there's been a slight change in the cobbled sections. There's 6, not 7, that there were last year. And there are 9 climbs for the women. Last year there were 12. So there's those changes to the course. In the end, they come up Oude Quatermont and Paterberg only once. The men do it twice. I went back to look at some of Lotte Kopecky's wins. She has won 3 times, and both in 2023 and in 2025 at about 18 kilometers to go on Oude Quatermont. That's where she's making a move. In 2023, she dropped Sylvia Persico there, got away, and won solo to the line. In 2025, Lotte Kopecky had a group which included Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, Liana Lippert, and Kasia Niewiadoma. That was the move. There were some games in the final kilometers. Niewiadoma tried to go early, but Kopecky won that one once again. So I don't know, is she the favorite?
I think so. I think that's what it comes back to, year after year. Even though women's cycling is a lot more open, I think it is maybe one of those times where the strongest, well, not necessarily the strongest, but the dominant rider wins. I am, however, excited to see how some of our Canadians do. Of course, Maggie Cole-Sleister starting this race as well. Hopefully she'll have better luck in terms of crashes and be able to make it to the finish unscathed, and hopefully that'll help her get some better placing.
Yeah, and on the topic of Canucks, I see Alison Jackson, a monument winner, on the start list as well. Who do I see here?
Emily Fortin, she was just added.
And to your point there, James, there is a lot of firepower at this race. On the start list, I'm seeing Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, once again, Noemi Rugg, Puck Pieterse, Lisa Balsamo. There's a lot of strong riders here. So while I would still say Lotte Kopecky is the favorite, as well as her teammate Lorena Wiebes, I think it'll be a good competition and fun to watch. For the men's Tour of Flanders, there are 6 flat cobbled section and 16 steep cobbled climbs. It's 271 kilometers. Oh, and I should add that the distance for the women
164
is 164, longer than Milan-San Remo. Thank you, Matt.
No problem.
For my study of this race on the men's side, I feel like this is the complete opposite of Milan-San Remo, where patience is the name of the game. Flanders is just going to be action-packed, or it will continue to be action-packed. And like the women's race, where Lotte Kopecky is the favorite, I'm going to say Pog's the favorite here. Anyone want to disagree with me? James, do you want to counter that with anything?
Well, I think if we go back and we look at the results from 2022 till now, it's been Van der Poel, Pogačar. So I think just for the sake of that, I think it's Van der Poel's turn. But it would line up so nicely. And then they can then pick Pog again the next year. They just keep trading it back and forth. It would be a great bit.
I don't think that's how sports works, unfortunately. Otherwise, the Blue Jays would win the World Series this year. I would say the one person that would disagree with you, Matthew, about Pogačar winning is Van der Poel. I mean, he's obviously the one, I think. I mean, well, it'd be cool to see him up there, but barring incident, I think it's still going to be those two in the finale there, probably. But I'm welcome to see Mads Pedersen or someone else. That'd be cool.
Mads Pedersen has had strong finishes at Ronde van Vlaanderen. He missed out on Gent-Wevelgem, so let's hope he is back in top form for this race. Oh, I should add, we are recording this before Dwarsdoor Vlaanderen. The caveat here is that Dwarsdoor can cause problems. I'm thinking of the crash that Wout van Aert suffered in 2024. That was a very serious crash that kept him out of racing for quite some time. So there are some riders who are skipping Dwarsdoor Vlaanderen, and then there are some who are going to do both Dwarsdoor and La Ronde.
De Ronde.
I'm excited to see Matthew Brennan, who's scheduled to do both the Vlaanderens. He is the 20-year-old rider on Visma Lease Bike. If everything goes according to plan at the Tour of Flanders, Visma Lease Bike will have quite the powerhouse with Wout van Aert, Matthew Brennan, and Christopher Laporte, who was third at Middelkerk to Wevelgem in Flanders Field again, Wevelgem.
I think the big thing for Flanders, I'm super excited for it. I think the sheer scale of it is going to be crazy. The one thing everyone's been telling me while I'm here is that this is the biggest day in Belgium. This beats every other big celebration day, party, whatever. This is the day where everyone in Belgium will be out at the race. So I, for one, am super, super excited to get to witness it in person.
I've heard some of our American colleagues call it or compare it to the Super Bowl. So you're going to have to get to the Super Bowl somehow to be able to do this comparison.
Surely that's in the budget for next year.
Clearly, yeah. We'll fly you in. All right. Looking forward to La Ronde van Vlaanderen, Da Ronde van Vlaanderen, the Tour of Flanders. I'm sorry, I got to go with the translation here. I have trouble twisting and turning throughout the original Flemish name of that race.
You're not a very good Fleming.
I'm not a very good Fleming. I also don't ride well on cobbles, so there you go. Let us turn to our feature interview with Gord Fraser. He's from Ottawa. Nepean, to be precise. And he's of a certain vintage because he refers to the city on the other side of the Ottawa River as Hull, but it is, of course, Gatineau today.
What?
Yeah, update your maps there, Hansen.
When did that happen?
He had a successful road career throughout the 90s and into the 2000s. He has many wins. I'd almost say countless because they're hard to keep track of. Some have posited 200, but Gord and I get into that number in the interview. Matt, why don't you give us some of your recollections or insights or knowledge into the legend Gord Fraser?
Well, I remember hearing about him because I remember when I was, first year senior, he had the national 15K record, and I was always trying to break it. And I think I got close, but like maybe 10 seconds off. This is back when we had, clip-ons and disc wheels. But I heard about him, and then it was a few years later, we did a couple projects together because he was by that point racing a Motorola. And he just didn't get raced a lot. So I think we did both together on this composite team. And of course, he's, big deal. He's won all these races. So you learn a lot from him for sure. I remember just doing races and he's like, "Oh, Matt, don't go in the early break." And I said, "Gord, that's all I got. Wait for the end." And I was like, "Why should I wait for the end? You're going to win the sprint," which he did. But at the same time, he was a nice older guy. He's older than me to learn from as a mentor. And I think lots of younger guys would say the same thing too, that he was just a tactical whiz, even though he didn't really need much tactics because he could just win the sprint anyway. And I remember when he did the tour that year in 97 on Mutual de Sereng a Mound. That was pretty neat as well. But yeah, all in all, he had a long career.
That idea of him mentoring young riders is going on today. In fact, over the past 17 years, he's been in the director's chair, the director's seat, and he's helped many, many Canuck riders and American, U.S. riders as well on their journey through their road cycling careers. In this interview, near the end, Gord tells a story that we at Canadian Cycling Magazine were a part of. Usually, we just report the stories, but in this case, we helped to make it. It involves Gord and a bike he rode a long time ago. And before we get into this interview, I will just say that by the end of it, you'll know the band and the album that I've gone back to listen to, and I'll tell you, it still holds up. And that's I was reminded of that thanks to Gord. So without further ado, here is the feature interview with Gord Fraser. Gord Fraser, welcome to the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast. You are a Canadian Cycling Hall of Famer, In the past 17 years, you've directed a number of teams, usually composed of younger riders who you've helped in the early stages of their road careers. Before that, you were quite a successful racer. If anyone searches you up on the web, they'll come across an impressive figure: 200 race wins. I've even seen 250. You have a remarkable number of wins connected with your name. Now, this figure of 200 is a fact checker's nightmare. There's no doubt that there are many wins, but can you tell me about this 200 wins statistic?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea where it came from. It just kind of appeared on online, Wikipedia or something, and it's probably my total's probably not near that, but there's a few years where I was winning 30 races a year, so maybe extrapolate that over 20 years of racing, who knows? But yeah, Scott Moninger, my teammate on Mercury and HealthNet, he could also boast a win total like that. So of course, much different style of wins, but he was quite prolific in the GC and climbing, whereas I took care of the single day stuff, the sprint stages, some crits, some time trials every once in a while. So I think with Mercury and HealthNet, we had a pretty nice coverage of race wins for those 8 or 9 years.
Was it like a friendly competition between you guys? Who could get more wins?
Yeah, a little bit. Also because in the States, they also had the NRC, the National Racing Calendar. It was quite an important competition. It was an evaluator of who was the best rider and the best team. And actually on Mercury, I know we had contractual bonuses tied in with the NRC. So I think I won the NRC twice. Scott might have won it twice or maybe more times, but it was always interesting to see if a sprinter type would win the NRC or a GC type. But I think it kind of went back and forth. Yeah, they don't have that series anymore, or those rankings, and I think it's to the detriment of the domestic calendar.
I want to get more into the domestic calendar, the North American calendar, and maybe how it's evolved in the past 20 or so years. But before we cover that topic, is there one win that stands out for you above the rest?
I don't know. I mean, I think one of the most memorable ones wasn't mine. It was when Hank Vogels won Philadelphia. For Mercury, it was a big accomplishment for us. We had the CEO of Lincoln Mercury in the team car. It was kind of the mechanism to, spark a little bit more sponsorship and a thrust to go to Europe and try to take on the Tour de France in the Division One ranks. Even though it imploded and blew up spectacularly, at least we got the ball rolling with that win with Hank. So I think that one was pretty special. Chris Weary won Philadelphia as well on HealthNet, and that maybe that week in 05 for HealthNet when we won the whole Philly or the Philly week. So we had Yvonne Dominguez win Clarendon Cup, and I won Trenton, and Henderson won Lancaster, and Weary won Philly, and that was taking on some pretty good European programs. And when we swept that week, that was a pretty special week.
I forget that there were so many races connected with Philly. I think of it as the one event up the Manioc Wall, but there was a lot more racing around that area.
Yeah, they always had the three races: Trenton, Lancaster, and Philly, and then that really good criterium in Arlington, Virginia, kicked it off as well for a few years. Really hard, 100K, always hot, super windy, quite a tough crit. That was kind of like our biggest week because we didn't really have Tour of Georgia was kind of going, but we didn't have Tour of California. We didn't have Colorado race. We didn't have Utah race. So Philly week was really the biggest race of the season, right in the middle in June. Yeah, everything was kind of leading into Philly. So we would do some of these races like Tour of the Gila or the races in Arkansas, all in preparation for Philly, because Philly had its own demand being so long. It was 250K. So, it wasn't uncommon, in stages of Tour of the Gila, we would ride an extra hour or two after each stage just to to get, to really compete with the Europeans, because the Europeans always came over for Philly week because it was such a big deal. So we we knew we had our work cut out for us endurance wise for those races.
What is one of the earliest victories you can remember?
Well, I won my very first race. It was a criterium in Majors Hill Park in Ottawa behind the Parliament buildings. It was on a bike path, and I was 13. It was a 13 to 15-year-old category. I just remember that in sprinting, you can alter your lines. And actually, I remember putting the kid into the barriers, and he was a lot bigger than me. And it was probably the best hook I ever threw in my whole career. Was the very first race when I was 13. So I won that race in Majors Hill Park, and actually probably was the dirtiest sprint I ever did.
Was the other racer okay?
Yeah, he didn't crash or anything, but I sealed him up pretty good among the barrier. So yeah, he couldn't go anywhere.
Now tell me about the Ottawa scene when you were coming up in the late '80s, other than your dirty races behind the.
Well, it was all centered, I think, around the Ottawa Bicycle Club, the biggest club in the area. Of course, there was all these satellite racing clubs, either in the Ontario or the Quebec side. But the Ottawa Bicycle Club was certainly kind of where my family went into quite young. We would have published Sunday rides where my dad and I, we would kind of look at the speeds. Like there was easy roller, tourist, sportif, and extra sportif. Those were the 4 levels. And it was like the goal to get into extra sportif, which was above 30K an hour average speed. So once I started racing with the Ottawa Bicycle Club in 86 as a junior, we just happened to have 20 or 30 juniors sign up that year. You know, we had a big crew of volunteer coaches, Don Moxley, Dave Yole, Bob Simpson. I'm probably forgetting some, but we had the support of the club. So we would race in Montreal and Kingston and Toronto and Ottawa. I mean, between those racing scenes, pretty much by April all the way through September, we could race every weekend somewhere. And they bought a big van for us, and we climbed in that van and did the whole racing scene in Eastern Ontario and Western Quebec. So it was a real pleasure to be a part of that OBC program.
What was taped to the door that led to the basement of the house you grew up in Nepean, Ontario?
Well, my dad was a junkie for the Cycling Weekly magazines. So he would go into the mall, the bookshop and the magazine store in the mall close to us. My dad made sure that they would import Cycling Weekly. So it was a Helms cartoon, and Helms was the cycling cartoon in the Cycling Weeklies. So it was a Cycling Weekly cartoon that it depicted a young child racer kind of taped up or handcuffed to the wall, and a brooding parent that said, scratching daddy's new bike is a serious offense. So all the bikes were down in the basement. So it was a warning not to scratch, especially when my dad, when he got his Bertrand and his Gardine. Yeah, it was just a fun cartoon.
We're going to touch on old bikes like a Gardine and a Bertrand a little later. But I love that image of the warning to young Gord on the door. You raced professionally from about, let's say, 1994 to 2008. That's a healthy career. You just talked about Philly and the races in and around there and how important they were. But are there any other races that maybe no longer exist or that have changed dramatically from the time you raced? And that meant a lot to you that may not even exist today?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, races are struggling to keep existing both in Europe and in North America. But I would imagine North America, the attrition rate is a lot higher just because the costs and the ability to close roads in North America is a lot more difficult. Insurance, just willing promoters that really take on the challenge of putting on bike races. I think that's also something that's tough, and it's just a tough sport to sell to sponsors. So yeah, I mean, the domestic calendar, there's a lot of races that have kind of come and gone. Luckily, we've talked about Philly, and it's making a comeback this year. So that's really exciting to see Philadelphia return to the calendar. I talked just briefly about those big stage races that we had. We had Tour of Georgia, Tour of California, Tour of Colorado and Utah. They were really good for many years for the domestic teams, albeit sometimes a bit of a challenge because when California went World Tour, then that excluded the domestic teams. And some of the other stage races, they made it very financially difficult for domestic teams with activation issues and kind of pay to play dynamics. So it's tough. Like I said, a lot of races have come and gone. It's good to see some of the stalwarts still here. So we have Redlands coming up. I'll be taking tag, of course, to Redlands, Tour of the Gila here in New Mexico, just a couple hours down the road. And we have Philly back. Of course, there's Tour de Bloom up in Wenatchee, which is a new up and coming race that we've done the last couple of years. There's a fairly robust criterium scene as well in the US. I just haven't been a part of the criterium circuit at all in my directing life in the last 15 years. I've always had a team that's been more focused on the stage racing and the road racing scene. There is still a pulse in the US, but it was on life support there for a few years, and it's getting a little stronger. And hopefully, like I said, maybe there's new partners that can come in. Philly's back, which is really great shot in the arm. We still have Tour of Beauce in Canada, which is great. It'd be really nice to see maybe Tour of Gastown and the BC Super Week series. Maybe that can get back to its old self with multiple days of racing in the greater Vancouver area. But yeah, it's tough. We definitely have to look to foreign races. So we have a team racing we have a tag squad for Uruguay coming up in 2 weeks. I'll be taking the team to France in May. We'll do hopefully Tour Martinique again, like we did last year, just after nationals, which was a great experience, and maybe another fall trip to Europe. So yeah, I mean, all the teams you'll see, even the smaller teams in the US, APS, Project Echelon, Skyline, all these teams are looking for alternative race programs, and you'll see us at smaller but well supported races in Europe and Asia and South America. We have to do that as well.
Now, do you have to travel because there aren't as many races here, or is it the exposure to racing in a global sense?
I think it's a bit of both. We're going to do the North American stuff as per usual, but to fill in to have an adequate race calendar to develop the young athletes we help, we need to find race days. And like Uruguay, it's not UCI, but it's a 8-day race, and sometimes, and we did Martinique as well last year, and it's not UCI. But the advantage of it not being UCI is it's not constrained by stage numbers or stage distances like the way the UCI would kind of cap them. So the boys that are going down to Uruguay, they're going to have almost 35 hours of racing. There's 4 stages at 200K. And so that's a really great opportunity to develop the athlete. So yeah, sometimes it's a bit of, it's a little extra budget and it's a little extra planning, but it's well worth it. And hopefully the boys will develop accordingly.
So that's the plan for TAG, which is the club team that you're involved with. This is going on to your 4th season. I want to dip more into that in a moment, but I kind of want to go back to your past maybe one more time. Most of your career was on North American teams, but you had a stint on a French team, Mutuelle de Seine-et-Marne, in 1997. How would you characterize your time on that squad?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with Motorola stopping, we all had to scatter. Most of the guys went to Cofidis. George Hincapie, I think he was the only one that went directly to US Postal, which was an emerging team kind of out of the Subaru Montgomery program. I wasn't quite done with Europe. I felt like I still had a lot of unfinished business.
Why is that? What was the unfinished business?
I think just my results weren't good. I wasn't really a priority on Motorola. I was definitely kind of like last guy to add to a race, and sometimes the last guy to be taken off the squad to my detriment. So I had known the guys, the riders, but also the management of Mutuelle because they came out of the US Crete amateur team. and I had done some racing against them when I was on ASPTT Paris. So, it was a nice option. It was a smaller team, but what happened was I was a bigger fish in a smaller pond in terms of team hierarchy. And then I hit the ground running. I was top 5 in multiple bunch sprints, from the Tour of the Med, the Toile de Bessèges, 4 days of Dunkirk, Midi Libre. I won a stage in Midi Libre, which was really helpful for the team to get a wild card into the Tour de France. So, yeah, it was just one of those things where I had unfinished business in Europe. I knew the program. It was a Division two team, or Pro Conti, I guess, level team back then. But I knew I'd do all the races. I do all the classics that they could get into. I could do Paris-Roubaix. I could do all the good stage races in France, all these French Cup races, which really was up my alley in terms of my abilities. So it worked out quite well. I wouldn't say it was all peaches and cream, because being a foreman on the French team is always challenging. But I had Steve Rover, who had just come off a amazing Tour de l'Avenir the year before. So he came on board and we did a lot of training together, and he kept my sanity. And yeah, it was really good to get to know him a lot better. So got through the year, but it was clear that Europe and me just didn't mix. And luckily, this Mercury team was kind of emerging. There was some controversy, I suppose, with the team the year before, had some sponsors deals, but really it was time for me to quit Europe and try out USA.
Now, you had the distinction of being, I think, one of 3 riders in the modern era to do Canadian riders to start the Tour de France. There was Alex Stida, Steve Bauer, and then you. If you want to go way back, I think some people would argue that this gentleman, Pierre Gauchon, who was born in France but immigrated to Canada and lasted 1 day in the Tour, was probably the first Canadian. But anyway, you're part of a select group, and for a long time, there were just Canucks who had been to the Tour. What was it like for you to go to the Tour?
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting thing. Like in the summer, with Mutuel getting the wild card. I think mostly because the big French teams at the time. So you're talking GAN, what is now AG2R, what were they called? Casino, I think at the time.
And they're not even AG2R anymore.
Castorama, maybe. I don't remember all the French teams, but what was apparent is all the French teams would be heavily populated with foreign riders. So we had this advantage where the Mutual team would be mostly French. I think I was the only foreigner on the tour team. And the Tour de France, they needed French people in the race. So that definitely worked to our advantage. But to our credit, I won the stage in Midi Libre. And actually, our climbers did really well in both the Midi Libre and the Dauphiné Libéré. So it was enough. We got the wild card, and it was like, holy crap, like we're in the show. I don't think there'll ever be another $1.5 million budget team in the Tour de France. We're probably the last of those. But, we all got new bikes. I remember, we were on steel looks, which was kind of an oxymoron, I thought, because look, we're so famous, leading the carbon trend, but we weren't a big enough team to even get a carbon bike. So we got a fancy new steel bike, a lot lighter, with a carbon fork, which was nice. And then they also took off the Sachs brakes that were so crappy in the rain. So we actually had Campagnolo. They bought Campagnolo Chorus brake calipers, which was great. But my first panic stop, I think I went over the bars because I'm used to the Sachs brakes with the Cinder brake pads, which needed incredible amounts of hand force to get any kind of braking power. So we got our brand spanking new look steel bikes. Got a bunch of new clothes. And we went to the show, and it was a wild time. And I just remember like the prologue in Rouen. We had done the Dauphiné 10 days before, basically the same peloton, maybe 60-70% of the same riders. And but the tour is different. The tour is the all of Europe and the media and everything. It's just a giant festival, and a massive undertaking. You know, you're sitting on the start ramp, and there's robotic cameras like following your every move. It's like, oh, yeah, this is a bit different. And so it was a little intimidating, but yeah, it was a great experience for me.
Switching back to today, is this your 17th season as a director? Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think the first year was 2009 with Team Type 1. There's been some stop starts in there, like 2014 was kind of a lean year before Sober came about. And then during COVID, I was working with the El Grupo youth nonprofit here in Tucson. So there was about a year where I wasn't really regular on the road. But yeah, pretty much 17 years of directing.
Largely the teams you've worked on have been development squads or continental outfits. You mentioned Silber, that was Continental, later became Floyd's Pro Cycling. You were in Israel Premier Tech for a bit, and if I remember correctly, your focus there was mostly the development squad. You mentioned Project Echelon, and you're working closely today with TAG Cycling. TAG is based in Vancouver largely, and it has supported riders such as Mara Roldan, Sydney Swearinga, Carson Matern, and Maggie Coles-Lister. Is TAG doing anything special to help its riders develop?
Well, I mean, again, it's just providing the opportunity, right? And getting the kids to the races in a sensible level, you know, where they can express themselves, they can aspire to win the race, but also, you know, improve and develop as athletes. So it just happens to be, you know, where I've landed all these years, and it's a lane that I really enjoy. I like the younger riders. They're malleable, they're coachable. You can kind of make a difference, I think, and mold them a little bit easier than say an established pro. So this so happens like that's been where I've fallen all these years, and I really like it. And with TAG, you know, that's a really great community. Leslie Tomlinson, the founder of TAG, with Gina Grain, back in the day, you know, she runs a studio in North Van and in Whistler. So, you know, she's really developed this community, and it's through that community that's provided the funds to help the next generation of racers. So, I've been really fortunate enough to be of help to Leslie with her mission, and yeah, I really enjoy it. I like all the races. I look forward to going to Redlands every year. It's not too far from Tucson, so a pretty quick drive across the 10. And it's a place I hold very dear because I've had, you know, some success there, and I'm part of the Legends, you know, Hall of Fame for the race. And you know, it's a type of race that they have a real strong sense of community. Like we're all in host housing, and I've kept in touch with all the host houses over the years, and it's definitely like a family out in Round. So it's a real special race. Again, it's not a UCI race, but it still holds a lot of clout. There's still directors and teams that look at the results of Redlands, and the development of talent is going younger and younger and younger. And so these races are all important. Of course, data is probably paramount now, and probably more important, I'd say, than even results are. But getting a stage win, let's say you win Sunset Stage of Redlands, that still speaks very high volumes and can definitely open doors for young riders. So hopefully a tag rider will step through that door.
Your mention of Redlands reminds me of a few things. It isn't UCI, and for some odd reason, it's never listed on pro cycling stats, which drives me nuts, because I was looking up one of your riders who in 2016 won Redlands. This is, of course, Matteo Dalcin. I'm sure you remember that. I spoke with him that year, and you came up. I asked him about having you as a director, and here's what he said. I'm gonna read his quote. It is, "Gord is an incredible director in terms of his ability to read the race and predict what's going to happen. It's almost to the point that you get a script before the race and you're just waiting for it to pan out. You're not wondering if what he said is going to happen. It's just whether you have the legs and are in the right position to execute when it actually happens." So, Gord, where did you get this ability, this road race ESP, this extrasensory perception for road races?
Oh, Uh, well, I mean, I think the races in the US is a little bit easier to predict because they follow particular patterns, right? And having done the races as many times as I have, either as an athlete or as a director, it really doesn't. It's really not rocket science, to be honest. But it's good to have that book of experience. You can lay it out to the athletes, expect this, but in cycling it's never black and white, right? It's always multiple shades of colors and grays. So you kind of outline what is the most likely scenario to happen. And I try not to overcloud team meetings. It's just like, okay, here's generally what will happen, but expect the unexpected as well. So yeah, high praise. But Mateo, that was an amazing day from what I remember, because we were behind going into the sunset stage, and it was him and Nigel that made the early break. They just went after it, and I think it was Jameis. They had quite a few South American guys on the team at the time, and I think it was Acevedo that might have had the jersey. And yeah, they went out and grinded in the break and blew the chase up. And so that was a really great win for Mateo. It was exciting for the silver program. That 2016 squad, we weren't off the podium in anything, whether it was Gila, I believe, with Alex Cataford, Nigel and Joe Martin. I think we won, maybe it was that year that Ryan Roth won Winston-Salem. Ben Perry was producing. Chris Dahl won a big stage for us in Tour of Utah with the yellow jersey. That 2016 silver team was a special one.
For sure. I definitely remember seeing its results littering our website. It was pretty exciting. Here's a scenario I'd like you to accept or refute or modify. I'm going to lay it out. It seems to me that newly retired racers have an advantage as rookie sport directors. The new DSs have raced with and against many of the riders still on the road. They know the riders' quirks and tells, so these new DSs can give, great advice to their teams. An older DS maybe lacks this insider knowledge. Is that a fair characterization between young and old director sportifs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'll see a lot of retired racers graduate and go to the UCI and take the director course and be thrust right away into the role of director. Yeah, I think they do have an advantage for that. They're closer to the same age. They know the exact demands. They know in size of the peloton, the stresses and all that. So yeah, they definitely have an advantage on that. And it's tough to compete with those guys. Yeah, it's the dynamic, and it's only natural, and yeah, it only makes sense that especially like a rider that was maybe a team captain on the road. When I hear and I watch big races in Europe and I see, oh, that guy's now in the director chair. Oh, yeah, he rode like a captain, so that makes sense that he could be a good director, like Daryl Impey, for example. So yeah, it's tough to compete with those younger guys.
Well, I was going to say, what does an older DS who spent a few seasons in the team car do to keep up their knowledge, up to date?
Oh, I think like this morning I'm watching Grand Prix Denain online, and I'm watching a certain team in yellow completely blow it, and it's fun to analyze like what kind of call would I have made in that situation. Of course, I'm being pretty critical, but things happen in races that are tough, and I've made plenty of mistakes in my directing career. But yeah, just being passionate about the sport. That's the number one thing of being a director. Exuding that enthusiasm to the riders. I tell the riders every year, and they'll probably roll their eyes again when I tell them this year that I would do anything to turn the clock back 25 years and be racing in their shoes. Like, this is the best years. It's the most fun. You're embarking on a journey that, if you make the grade and go into the pro ranks, like Nick Zukowski and Pierre-Andre Cote, and these guys are having solid long careers. I would do almost anything to be in their shoes again. Hopefully they take, they have that passion and really, because you really do need it, because cycling is so difficult and it's so many sacrifices. that if you're not passionate and enjoy every second of it, it's definitely make life a lot more difficult.
You were just describing the study session you had almost this morning, watching the race in France. I guess you were up super early, streaming it online. Does this feel like work to you? Are you studying as a student? Are you like taking notes? Is this homework, or is this just organically what you do and what you take in throughout your day?
I would probably do it even if I wasn't if I had a desk job somewhere, I'd still try to watch the races and be an armchair critic. But no, I love bike racing. I don't like a lot of aspects of it sometimes, but when you see a race being thought out tactically and physically on these beautiful race courses, and it's just covered so well that yeah, I'm still a big fan. And then analytically trying to convert what I see into that book of knowledge, because it never stops learning.
What are some of the frustrations you have with cycling?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think it's getting just super top heavy. I think the sport is going in a direction where the base of the sport is crumbling, and I think there's not enough being done to support either the grassroots, the amateur, and especially those guys that need a few extra years to graduate to a world tour contract. I think those guys, there's not a lot of avenues for those guys to really try to make it and make a living, scratch a living to try to get to the top level. And there's multiple ways that I suppose that there should be more support in that area, but we'd be here probably all day.
I feel like there's a joke there, like ask two cyclists what's wrong with cycling these days, get three opinions, maybe. I do want to throw one more quote at you from a former rider of yours. You mentioned Team Type 1. That's your early days as a director. And a few years ago, I was speaking with Michael Creed, who today is the head sports director of EF Education Avolo. It's a continental development team. Creed remembered a time in 2009. You were an assistant sports director, I guess. And Creed was a rider. And the story he told was set after he'd been in a breakaway, one that he got into early and then worked really hard throughout. And he said that kind of performance can look good and, it can earn a rider some nice slaps on the back, but it can at the same time actually be kind of cowardly. I'm kind of paraphrasing him here, but he said what takes real guts is waiting patiently to test yourself against the strong riders. And then he said to me that you, Gord, took him aside and told him you're actually disappointed that he got into said breakaway. Now, I don't know if you... Oh, and I should add that this advice really stuck with him and opened his eyes. Now, I don't know if you remember any of this, but I bring it up. I bring up this story because being a director not only means, being encouraging and supporting riders and motivating them, but I imagine you got to tell them when they messed up. Do you have techniques for telling riders when they messed up?
Well, that particular instance, I remember like it was yesterday.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And you got the gist of it. Basically, what happened is there was a break, and Mike was chasse patate. He was in the middle the whole day and wasn't going anywhere. He got caught right near the end, and he got caught in the timing of his catch was such that then he couldn't contribute to the sprint. Right. So he fired all these bullets for nothing. It was not part of the plan. And when he was finished, he was expecting a pat on the back, like I did a good job. And I was like, well, no, because, that energy there could have been applied in a different way and really helped our sprinters and made an impact on the end result. And that's exactly, almost verbatim what I told him. And, he was, yeah, we still talk about that to this day because we're quite close friends. And he's a great director in his own right and has done great things.
Yes.
But yeah, in terms of yeah, it's tough, like, because it's a hard to see the mistakes now, especially in the development level, because most of the time we don't have radios, and if we're in the car you can't really see that much. Now that particular race was at the US Pro Criterium Championship, so I can see every lap and I can watch, Mike self-destruct, right? But yeah, it's tough. So it's a challenge to get debriefed in a way that can analyze exactly what happened in races, and then, going forward, providing the feedback and alterations that are needed. So yeah, without the radios at development level under 23 races, it's more challenging, but that just stresses the importance of having good dialogue with the riders.
Now, Michael Creed is a pretty self-reflective person, I think. I just imagine you've had stubborn riders. That could be a challenge.
Yeah, I've had some. You try to get through to them, and if you can't, then you just have to sit them and replace them with riders that are more receptive to your encouragements and your directing. But yeah, I've had plenty of guys that listen, but then that are racing for themselves. And I have, as many as any director would have, very short patience for that type of rider. Cycling still is a bit of a team sport. Yes, it's an individually run and scored event, but it's, to get any kind of traction with the guys, it has to be team first. And yeah, guys that are me first, they don't survive very long.
I don't know if we've said it directly, but you live in Tucson, Arizona. It is the home of the walk. What is the walk?
Yeah, I gave that name to the new velodrome. So we have a new velodrome, and Peter Junick was the designer and builder.
A Canadian, yep.
Yeah, so it's an all aluminum track. So it's the first one in the world. And so, I was looking in the kitchen and it's like, my walk's aluminum. So it sounds like a good nickname. I don't know if it's stuck, but yeah, it's been really well received. It's a little bit out of town, but it's where they have a go-kart track out there, which is a scale of Suzuka Formula One track. They've had bike races out there for 20, 25 years. So it's the same people that were kind of the driving force to get a velodrome. And there's a short track, NASCAR track. There's a drag strip. So a lot of motorsports facilities out there. And then there's a shiny new aluminum velodrome, which is incredible. Like, it's so grippy. It's almost, oh God, what's the word? It's almost scary in a way that my old instincts on the track, you need to go a certain speed to keep the centrifugal force upright. And you can go so slow on that track, and you're going underneath people that are going just as slow. And you're just thinking, there's no way they're going to slide down on top of me. But after about an hour of the first kind of like group session I did on there, you get used to it. And it should be an interesting addition to the cycling community here. I mean, obviously we have an incredible road community and mountain bike, just because of the weather and the options that you have. And this is just a great addition. So yeah, a walk.
I find that so fascinating, the sort of unique physics of that velodrome compared to the, I think it's Siberian spruce that's usually used, or marine grade spruce that's used on velodromes, that it behaves so differently.
Yeah, well, the way it's textured, and it's kind of sandblasted with glass, and there's like these mini ridges in it, so it's wicked grippy. I think you can go 15 kilometers an hour and stay upright. It's crazy, and it's really smooth. It can be windy out there. It's still kind of in the middle of nowhere, and I think the biggest challenge they'll have is actually blowing the dust off. So they have to. So we're pressure blow it from time to time.
Right. Like a leaf. I imagine a leaf blower.
Yeah, leaf blow. But yeah, they're slowly getting their infrastructure up. I'm sure in the future, like probably some kind of covering would be ideal, because I think in the summer months, obviously we'll probably have to wait till the sun goes down and go under the lights, just to have any hope of not dehydrating.
I was just going to say, I understand it's aluminum because of the temperature changes that Tucson faces.
Yeah, so I know the actual builder, Clayton Kyle. He's a friend of mine, and I didn't even know he was out there building it, which was interesting. The first time I went out there, and there he was. he explained to me that they purposely built it in the hottest time so that it was expanded. So they built it with that maximum expansion already kind of defaulted. So it'll contract when it gets cold. And so it's just a matter of how it expands and contracts. And you're only talking like, a millimeter, 2 millimeters in the panels and stuff. So unless there's some crazy difference that they haven't accounted for, I think they've got that all figured out.
I should mention that you've written for the magazine. You've written about some of the vintage bikes in your collection. There's been a Gardine made in Italy, not Mississauga. There was a Marinoni, a Bianchi X3, but there's one bike that has a really good story behind it. It's a Bertrand. You mentioned it earlier, or you mentioned a Bertrand earlier. But first, remind us about that brand.
Yeah, so Gilles Bertrand, the family Bertrand had a shop in Hull for years and years, and Gilles took up the frame building. And just so happened, my dad worked on the Quebec side in Hull, and it wasn't very far from my dad's work. And my dad had a birth defect. He had a one arm shorter than the other, so he was a prime candidate for a custom frame. So he got fitted by Gilles, and it was just a wonderful bike for my father. And so we became kind of a Bertrand family. And so my first serious race bike with the OBC, I had a Bianchi before that, and a Peugeot way back when I was really young. But when I got a license to race with the OBC, okay, I'm gonna get a Bertrand, and I was just gonna, get a stock frame because I got it when I was in grade 12, so I wasn't sure if I was still growing or not. So we decided on a 57 stock frame and painted it yellow, and that's the bike I rode, 86, 87, and I sold it in 88. And what sparked this whole, I ended up getting it back. And thanks to you guys at Canadian Cycling Magazine for running, I acquired a Bertrand 4 or 5 years ago. And it may be a bit small for me, but I just wanted a Bertrand in my collection to kind of remember my junior bike. And when you ran that piece about my current Bertrand, the story came out that, I always regretted selling my junior race bike. Well, the fellow, Sean Emerton, who read the article, and he's contacted you and said, I'm the one who bought the frame and I want to give it back. So yeah, we arranged, I was home in the summertime, before Beauce, and went to meet Sean. We went for a bike ride, and then we went to his place, and I got my original Bertrand back. Now it's gone through a little bit of change because he actually rode it from 1988 to 2005, if you can imagine. He had Gilles repaint it. He chromed the chain stays. He spread the rear stays because, when I bought it, it was 127, a 6-speed freewheel, right? And so it got cold set to 130 for the 8-speed and 9-speed years. And he added a second water bottle. And he had it repainted the same color. So it's in really great shape. And I just so happened to have it built up, and we did a nice, I think there's going to be a YouTube video about it with Fairwheel Bikes here in Tucson, who have been my support shop all throughout my career. I gave it to Jeff over there at Fairwheel, and we put on an 8-speed Dura-Ace build, and it's definitely my number one bike. I mean, I have lots of options to ride, but it's kind of like when back in the 90s when you got a really good CD and you just listen to the same CD over and over again, and your entire music collection got put on hold. Yeah, this is like I don't know what CD was like that for me. Maybe Soundgarden or something. All my other bikes now are collecting dust because I'm on my Bertrand almost every day.
It's your bad motor finger.
Yes, right.
I love that so much. That story tickles me to no end. I remember getting Sean's email thinking, are you kidding me? And forwarding it to you and then seeing on social media that you guys had met up. I was just, I love that. It's so cool.
And I couldn't remember. I was working at Ottawa Bikeway, Jeff Brown and his dad's shop. and it was a Miata shop. So I had moved over to Miata just to be, one with the shop. And so I remember having it in the back and trying to sell it, but I couldn't remember actually exchanging the money. And Sean said, "Well, it's because you weren't in town. You were away racing." So he came in the bikeway and gave the money to Jim Mackey, another guy I used to race with. And when I got the frame, I should have taken it, but I had written a bill of sale by hand, and he still had the bill of sale.
That's amazing.
And that explains why I don't remember the exchange, because I was out of town. But I definitely remembered the exchange back.
Amazing. Amazing. All right, Gord, before we wrap up, I'm just going to ask you, who are some of the up-and-coming riders we should keep an eye out for in the season ahead?
There's some nice talent coming out. We just briefly had Monty Rigby on tag. He did Valley of the Sun with us, 6th overall, and then he got a Continental ride Austria on Tyrrell KTM, which was great. So we had one race. We graduating up to a Conti team. Perfect. So watch out for him. He's got a pretty good motor, I think. Good head on his shoulders. We have Max Wojciechowski. I like him coming out of junior ranks. He's got a pretty good motor. Well, gosh, did you see Ashland Berry today in Dene? He might be someone to be reckoned with. You know who I'm really excited to see this year is Nathan Pruner. And he's a little bit older, but he went through such a bad crash at Beauce 2 years ago. He had 9 different fractures. And last year he kind of, took him most of the year to kind of get going, but he won a stage in Martinique and was really strong there. I just want to see him just do his best that he can. And he's such a good kid and got a lot of talent. So I'm really pulling for him, even though he's 24, a little bit older, but he still has room to grow and to ascend. So yeah, a lot of good characters on the team. I'm working with Yvonne Waddell, his son, Charles Waddell, and he's a real shot in the arm in terms of his morale and his attitude. He had a little crash here and in Tucson at training camp. So he wasn't on the ride one day, and everyone was remarking that it was a lot quieter without him around. So so I'm excited to work with him. He's going down to Uruguay, so he's going to get trial by fire there, because the Uruguayan peloton, they're older, they're experienced, and they know how to ride the crosswinds. So anybody going to Uruguay, so there's Gab Tilley, exciting prospect, Charles Waddell, Aiden Siebel, Danny Millam. So 4 of the kids are doing this race in Uruguay, and I'm looking forward to hearing all the stories from Gus Carrillo, who's de-essing the group down there.
Well, right on, Gord. I really appreciate the time. I really appreciate the look back and these looks ahead to upcoming talent. And maybe I'm looking forward to seeing some of your vintage bikes in the pages of the magazine. We'll keep that conversation going offline. Thanks very much, Gord.
My pleasure, Matt. Pleasure talking to you.
And that's the episode. It is written and edited by me. I had help from Matt Hansen. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
And James Bunga, thank you. Thank you from your on-the-ground dispatch from Oudenaarde.
Hey, thanks for having me. This has been a fun time to reconnect, far away from home.
Go get some 21 tubulars and go ride those cobbles. I'm sure there's a store that sells them around there. I'm almost positive.
Actually, there might be.
In fact, Gord Fraser would be proud of you if you did get an old steel bike and get some tubulars and go ride the pave. He'd be like, good for you, young man.
And yeah, I think our production schedule will get you on again for another dispatch. Anyway, we'll find a way. We'll find a way to hear more about your adventures in cycling's holy land. This episode is produced by Adam Killick. He does the music too. Thanks to Ontario Creates for its support. I got to go listen to some more Soundgarden and then get emotionally prepared for the Tour of Flanders. I don't know what you guys are doing. James, you're going to go ride your bike some more. That's cool. You got some time.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of bike riding to come for sure.
Might take a nap.
You have to feed the website, please.
Oh, right. Sorry, forgot.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Ride safely, and we'll talk to you later.